I now want to move on to rook and pawn endgames, basically where endgames where both sides have a king and a rook and then one or more pawns. So there's two positions you really have to know very well to really master these endgames. The first one we did was the king and pawn, and now the two that you have to master from king and rook. The first one is called the Lucena position. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. So that's the name of it right there. And the fundamental position is what I have here. The problem for white, it's white to move. The problem for white obviously is that he can't get out to one of these two squares. He can't get out. So the king really can't get out to promote the pawn. So how does white promote this pawn? Well, let's look at the obvious. Probably the moves most people would try would be, checking the king. So rook to c7 check, but black just goes king to d8, and then let's say if black checks, the king just comes back. White will notice, well, gee, I can't get anywhere. Maybe I'll switch it around and come to h8 and try to check him from the other side. Well, black will just sort of keep on this file right here, so it can't go. So the king can't go out that side, and then if white checks, then the king just goes back. Obviously, white can't really make any progress using that methodology. So what is white to do? Well, here are the moves. First, you want to check by rook to a d2 check. This is going to force the king. Maybe I should say the worst move that black can make would be king to c6, because king to c8 wins immediately. The rook can't come to here, and obviously doesn't matter if the rook comes to here. So white's going to easily promote the pawn, so that'd be a big mistake. So we know that black can't go to here. Obviously black can't go to here and here. Here and here doesn't leave too many squares left. So the best black can do is moving king to e7. And now with the key move in this position is playing rook to d4. What's going to happen is that we're going to build a bridge with our rook. So what happens is that the white king here is eventually going to come out to this side here, and then at an opportune time we're going to place, depending on how black plays, but one of putting the rook here or here to block, to bridge, and that's going to be the key. So rook to d4, and now black will play king to e6, approaching the rook. It can approach the rook and threaten to capture it. It doesn't want to move its rook off of this line here, or the king can just possibly come out. So now the white king will come out, and now black will sort of harass it, try to check it to death, or check it to what goes back in. Basically, black in this position is hoping for a draw. That's all that black can really obtain in this position. So it's going to go for a draw, and one of the ways is it can just check the king until it's forced to go back and hopefully get a draw by repetition. So rook to c1 check, king to b6, and then the rook will go back, check, and then the king will come back to c6, and this is where black has a choice. Depending on the player, there's two possible continuations from this position. One here, which seems obvious, and most people would probably play, but it's actually the quicker win for white, But the most obvious move is keeping, where black just keeps checking the king, and then now the rook comes, or the king comes to b5. Obviously, the rook cannot go down to the 8th rank, and trying to stop it, trying to put the rook here or here, just doesn't work. So rook to b1 check, and now we build the bridge. Now the rook comes over and builds the bridge and blocks, and obviously this rook cannot get over in time to stop it, and the king can't come over, so white will promote and win. So let's back up to where we had a choice. So we just played this move. This is where rook, the previous example, black played rook to c1. Also, the black could try just sort of a waiting move by rook to b2. Obviously, the pawn can't move forward, or black would just snap off the pawn. And what white does in this circumstance is rook to e4 check. Obviously, the king cannot come to any one of these squares. So the best move by black is to come to f5, hitting the sort of attacking the rook. But now the rook just comes to c4, building a bridge. Now what's going to happen, there's nothing that black can do to prevent white from playing king to c7 and then promoting the pawn. The only thing it could do is sacrifice its rook for the pawn, and then white would be left with a king and rook versus king endgame, which is a clear win for white. Well, that is the example of the Lucena position. Let's just maybe go over it, start just from square one. So it's rook to d2 check, the king comes to e7, then the key move, rook to d4, black will play king to e6, then the king comes out, and then black checks, white moves king to b6, b1, rook to b1 check, king to c6, and this is where black has an option. Obviously, if the rook just keeps checking, the king will come up. So rook to c1, and then interpose. Or if we go back, the rook could try to come to b2, and then we check. King comes f5, and we build a bridge that way. So you need to know that one cold. Let's move on to the next lecture. Maybe I'll cover the next critical position or go over some examples.